Actually, the way that we put it is we level the playing field. The goal is, and I've been having an absolute enjoyable time the last 18 months where everybody has been looking at what to do in China. But the irony is, it's 2018, so this is a statement of fact, I get that. But when I had set up a joint venture in China 15, 16 years ago, the mistakes that we made back then, because we had no idea what was really going on, there was no game plan. You now can go to that, you can look for experience, you can find out what worked and what didn't work, and not make those mistakes. The reason I'm here in New York, actually, is we have several clients that are making avoidable, costly mistakes that I can't for the life of me determine why they would do these sorts of things.
Things like what?
Marrying
like agreeing to go into a joint venture?
Well, it's...
I thought you were forced to do that.
No, you're not forced to do that. There are multiple options now, and there's a lot of, I think, elements that are just not really being picked up. Like, you can go in and set up a wholly foreign-owned enterprise and build it from scratch. We're seeing Dalio's doing it, Bridgewater, Vanguard's doing it. Fidelity's been really successful.
So why do we hear Secretary Mnuchin and others in the administration saying that part of what they want to fight for is not being forced to have these joint ventures and forced transfer of IP?
Well, because what you're looking at for the here and now is what I was just talking about with regard to the platform Fidelity's doing as an example, or Dalio. These are for not retail mutual funds, let's say. These are for private funds, high net worth. But over 3 years, this is what part of the whole argument or discussion has been. That is going to then trend into wholly foreign-owned mutual fund companies. So there's a step-by-step process that people are moving towards. The issue that I have with the mistakes is we still have groups that are tying up with counterparties. And the typical, we're going to marry that deal. The Chinese have a very typical way of negotiating, which is we're going to talk to a dozen different groups and have them all compete against each other so we get the best deal. The Chinese typically, or the Americans will typically come in, and Europeans. Right. And they'll have basically, we want to have this one partner, we like this one guy, it went really well, and they marry it, and they lose all negotiating power moving forward.
So you're, just to put this in context, you're saying that strategy is a failing strategy. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to walk into China today, you need to do what then?
Well, what you need to do is actually have a very clear idea of what you want to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years. And that is, right now, it's not about what you want to do, it's about how are you going to get it done. So the way that we phrase it is, it's very, very clear if you understand what the optionality is in the market, what you can do, but then it's how do you execute? How do you find the right people? How do you build in the process? How do you import what you do as an organization globally into China? And that's where things are falling apart.
Falling apart because?
Because there's not a lot of real thought going into it. It's more of this, let's just go get China done. Right. Someone go do it. And then there's no real, I would say, support from headquarters. A lot of groups now are finally starting to, I would say, fund it properly. To enter China right now, we've got at least a half a dozen groups that have invested $20 million US to build an asset management, wholly foreign-owned asset management platform in that market.
Given the conversations about tariffs and trade wars and things like that, a lot of people say that Apple, for example, could be considered a proxy for what's going to happen in China. Does that make sense to you?
It depends on what regard. I mean, in terms of demand or in terms of,
In terms of how much is manufactured there, for example. Right. Obviously there's Foxconn and that piece of the business now they're using the iCloud servers in China.
In China, right.
Is that relationship ever become more complicated?
Look, I think the Apple element, and this is outside of my wheelhouse. I'm not in consumer goods, but what I will say is that I think if you look at Tim Cook back in the day when he was running the show as an operating officer, he did a great job with the supply chain building it in China. I don't think that there was a lot of long-term thought put into it of exactly what they're facing right now. We call this the Faustian bargain. I've gone in because I'm going to make a lot of money out of China without thinking about what does this mean longer term for me. And I think a lot of firms, this is coming home to roost right now.
And you think they're going to end up moving their manufacturing facilities out of China?
I think a lot of firms are going to have a lot of hard discussions internally that should have happened a long time ago.
And do you think that those manufacturing facilities, by the way, end up moving back to the United States? Do you think they move? We had the Brooks CEO here talking about actually we just go to Vietnam or we go somewhere else.
It sounds like, and I've heard a lot of people say this, sounds great on paper. Try to get that to happen. The favorite thing I had that came out this week was Foxconn going to Wisconsin. Right. Oh, you don't have enough people. We're going to bring the Chinese literally in to work in those manufacturing outlets. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But this is a very typical way that the Chinese have operated globally.
Meaning the United States is not going to let them import Chinese workers to take the jobs that were supposed to be going to American workers, which is why they got the tax breaks?
Well, I think that it would, I mean, just the optics alone.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be even close to possible, no matter how many they can, actual employees they can find. But I think the ultimate idea is there is a groundswell and a shift about how to target China. And everybody, like I said, has gone through the process for so long without thinking really long term. And now we've got China.
Peter,
yeah.
Are you arguing that you can help people maneuver through this system and that it doesn't need political change from the heads of state to be talking about this? Or are you arguing that there are gradations of what you can do in the existing system?
Well, I can tell you full stop that what I do on a daily basis is to bring global financial service companies into China and help them navigate what is possible. I'm trying to steer so many away from the cliff at the moment because they're hearing all of these negative elements of what's possible. We can't do this, we can't do that. So what we're trying to say is, look, there is a gray area. This is the way China operates. So you have to manage within that gray area.
If Larry Page called you tomorrow and said, look, we've been testing this service, we're thinking about going back into China, you would tell him what?
Yeah, please don't.
You'd say, please don't?
Yeah.
Why?
Because and this is just on the IT side of it, where their own homegrown internet is, and I deal with the internet there all the day, every day.
Right.
They would not be able to achieve what they think they can achieve with, the Chinese government would have a lot of demands on them. They wouldn't be able to negotiate now from a position of strength. So they're better off just, I think, sticking to what they do well in other markets that they're open to.
Right. Given all the companies that you've worked with, some of which I imagine have had IP issues and other things, my question to you is actually about Huawei and its connection to SoftBank. We've been talking a lot about Huawei as the telephone operator.
Right.
There's been people have said that Huawei is a national security risk, not just in China, but outside of China. Do you think of any of these Chinese companies that are coming to the United States, do you think we need to look at them in a different way than we do today?
I think we need to I think the United States policy needs to look at not just Chinese, but all, I think, foreign tech companies in a similar way. I think what's happening right now is just, it's a great way to leverage up where President Trump is trying to negotiate with the Chinese to sort of, focus on, ZTE, Huawei, and all these other tech companies. But bear in mind, a lot of the technology so-called forced transfers over the last decade, I don't know how forced they were. These were actual companies that went in and said, we're going to do a joint venture with you. Here's our technology. The argument that we give to people all the time is, look, if you're iOS, right, you don't have to give them your latest version. If you have to bring in something to build a business, you give them version 5.0, not 13.2. So there are ways around what the Chinese are asking for. Oh, and here's the kicker. You can always say no. And this is what we tell clients all the time. Because there's an actual joke that goes along the lines of, the Chinese will ask the foreigners for everything because they might be dumb enough to give it to them. And that's what we're trying to stop groups from doing.